Okay, so senior dogs are definitely some of our most favorite patients, and we want to talk about the 3 things that every senior dog should have incorporated into their treatment plan to keep them active and comfortable well into their senior years. This is part 1. Okay, let's talk about weight loss. If there was only one thing that I could do for any dog, senior dogs included, but really any dog, to improve their pain, improve their mobility, and minimize the risk of them having longer term issues as they get older, it would be to get the weight off of them. We know now a lot more about fat than we used to know too. So there are 2 main reasons that we want to keep the weight off of these dogs. The first one, obviously, is because the heavier they are, the more stress that's putting on their joints. So we can minimize the strain and the discomfort on their joints by making them as light as possible. The second reason is because we know now that fat behaves as an organ all unto itself, and fat will release hormones that contribute to the inflammatory cycle. So fat produces these inflammatory mediators, inflammatory molecules, and so if there's inflammation going on in the body, the fat will release more molecules that will continue to perpetuate that inflammatory cycle. The less fat they have, the less of these inflammatory mediators they have, hopefully the less pain and discomfort and inflammation that they're going to have. So let's talk about body condition scoring, because that's the best way for you as a pet owner to know where your dog sits on the spectrum of lean to not so lean. So what we're usually looking for in terms of visual things on your dog that you can be assessing, if you look at them from up top, we want to see that they have a nice hourglass waist. So we should see from their ribs, and then we should see this little indent before their pelvis. So that tells us they don't have too much fat carriage sort of along their back there. If you look at them from the side, we don't want them to look like a barrel all the way across. They should still have a nice pelvic tuck kind of going up towards their pelvis. And then the last one would be over their ribs. You should be able to feel their ribs through their fat coverage. So if you can't feel that, then it probably means that they've got too much there. Okay, I'm going to show you a super quick way that you can body condition score your dog at home. And this is specifically using their ribs sort of as the thing that you're going to be assessing. So we can do this using our own hands. If you take your hand and you open your palm like this and you feel sort of where the underside of your knuckles are, if that's what your dogs feel like when you sort of feel over the top of their ribs, I can't really feel much in there, it feels pretty fleshy, that's usually because they've got too much fat carriage over top of their ribs. So that's too heavy. Alternatively, if you turn your fist around the other way and feel literally over top of your knuckles, those are very prominent. So if you imagine that that's your dog's ribs, that might be a little bit too thin. In an adult dog, there's almost never too thin in my books. However, that would just give you a bit of an assessment as maybe they're trending a little bit too thin. If you open your palm like this and then feel over top of your knuckles, you should still be able to feel them, but they're maybe not quite as pokey as this. That's where we want them to be. That's probably about average, where if you feel over your dog's ribs, you can very distinctly feel them. So it's not that they're too skinny, but there's not a lot of fat coverage there sort of hiding those ribs. So that's what we want to aim for. That's a quick 30-second test that you can do on your own dog just to see sort of where they sit, and then you can compare that to some of these scales and see kind of where they sit along the scale out of 9. Ideally, most of the time we're happy with 5. I usually want them to be a 4, 4.5, because I know every pound that we get off of them is going to make their life easier. So we want to try and get as much extra weight. If they don't need to carry that weight, it needs to come off. And in the long term, it's just going to make their life a ton easier. Let us know if you have any questions.